Go ahead.
Hey, this is Essence. I am a realtor with Carter Realty Group, and this is
Dr. Jadon Waller. Call me Dr. J.
And I'm Angela Kiel-Hulbert, realtor with Carter Realty Group as well.
And thank you for joining us for today's conversation. Well, today's cocktails, conversations, and contracts. Today, we are discussing the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in school districts and how that may affect you when you are looking for a home. All right, so we are going to start the conversation by asking our resident expert, Dr. J, a question so she can kind of kick off the conversation.
Sure.
So, Dr. J, how important is diversity and equity in terms of the success that a student would have in school?
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, that is a huge question and a long answer.
Okay.
But I will try to make it as short as possible. But ultimately, I mean, historically, there's just been this landscape of the desecration of Black and brown culture from the educational school system with, desegregation. And, we grow up learning about desegregation as being this phenomenal thing, but no one really addresses the idea that culture and the way that we taught our students and even those leaders who lost their jobs and how them going into those white spaces have, really negatively, unfortunately, impacted their ability to see themselves and what they're learning. So, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, all the fun pop words are imperative to our students learning because they really need to see themselves and not from these lenses of white, ethno, European perspectives. So, one thing that I just taught a group of high school math teachers was around ethnomathematics and talking about Kemet and that teaching the history of math from that perspective because the math that we use now is taught from the Greek perspective. So there's small nuances and opportunities for students to really learn who they are. So it's important.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think before we go even further, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Okay. So I actually taught in Chicago Public Schools. I taught in the suburbs, high school English. And then I came out to Joliet, shout out to Dirksen, as a dean. And then I left because they did not pay enough, sorry. But I left, went to West Aurora, came back to Joliet. And, that's when I actually had a great opportunity to work with Mike Clark and on our committee and get into equity work. And so I've been pushing ever since then. So now I'm in Oswego 308 as their director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Awesome. And we work it.
All right. Thank you. So you all both have children. I don't, but I deal with a lot of children throughout my entire life, actually, like teaching dance, nieces and nephews. So when you all were looking for, I guess, a home or what school district your kids were in, what were some of the things you took into consideration when looking for a home in a district, and what were things that stuck out to you?
Personally, I looked for just a diverse population. We'd gone through different school systems where no one looked like my son. No one, from teachers, substitutes, the janitor, no one in the entire school looked like my son. And so when we made a move, I wanted to make sure that, not all Black, not all white. I didn't want any of one population. I wanted it to be a mix because that's what the real world is like. You're not going to just walk into a space and everyone looks like you. Right. That's not realistic. So our current school system is very diverse. And, it was just a good feeling, and he came home a couple weeks ago, actually, and he said, "Mom, I had a Black substitute, and she was a lady, and she was so nice." But that was his first time. Yeah. And he's in third grade, but this was literally the first time that he'd ever had a teacher that looked like him. Right. And so, I thought that was amazing. Okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I get that feeling too when I'm walking in different school buildings and it's always little Black girls and they're like, "Are you the new dean's assistant? Yes. Are you the new teacher?" Yep. And I'm like, "I'm not, but I work for the district. I'll be back." They're like, "Oh my gosh," and they have a little bit of joy. So I would say the same as for me. I lived in the city when I was teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and then we came out to Plainfield, but I was looking closer to being South Plainfield because it's closer to Joliet, and there's more diversity in those spaces. And I looked at Bolingbrook as well,
Right,
Romeoville, and
yes,
right those spaces. Because I'm like, I know there's diversity there, but understanding too, like North Plainfield is not right. So it was a big part. I will say the one thing that was a challenge is, my son, he loves his people. He loves Black and brown folks. It's not that he doesn't love everybody, but those are his people. And so he was able to get into their gifted program this school year, and now he's back to, it's just him and one other boy who's African. And so it's been a challenge.
Yeah.
It's been a real challenge for him.
And so both of my sisters are in education. And they talk about how excited their students are when they see someone who looks like them. The small things like someone who can let them borrow edge control.
Hello.
Right? You know what I mean? It seems so minuscule to the outside world, but for us, we understand how important it is to be able to say, hey, you know what? There are some things that she can relate to me about, or that he can relate to me about that nobody else can. And those are those points that sometimes people don't necessarily take into consideration until it's no longer there.
Absolutely.
Right? Go ahead.
Think about when we went to Laraway.
Yes.
Like we had Mrs. Summers,
Yes.
Mr. Carter,
Yep.
Mr. Sane, and these were like staples of just my childhood.
Yes.
Like it was a great feeling to go to track practice, and he was rough.
Yeah.
But I knew it was all in love, and it felt like family.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it was I knew that that was something that was important for me, and I want that for my son. Like I want him to feel comfortable. Like literally, you spend more time away from home at school than you do sometimes with your own family. So it's important for you to feel connected.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I see people talk about when they've had their first Black teacher or their first teacher that looks like them, right? And for me, it was at Laraway. Go Lancers. But it was at Laraway. So, fifth grade, I think, or fifth or sixth, whatever it was when I had the fabulous Mrs. Summers, is when I had my first Black teacher. And I didn't have to wait until high school, or I didn't have to wait until college when I got, unfortunately, an African American studies teacher. But I do remember in college taking African American studies so that I could have a Black teacher. Because I love us.
Yeah, that's interesting. I honestly never had a Black teacher except a choir teacher in high school. And even when I went on to college, all of my teachers were white, and I was the only person of color in my teaching program. And it wasn't until, even with my master's, I was the only person of color in that space. When I got my doctorate, it was all online, but I was like checking for names. And I actually was able to have my first teacher when I just finished school in August again, but Dr. Donna Leaks, and they didn't even give me her initially, and I was like, can I have her?
Yeah.
and so I reached out to her like, I need you.
Yes.
And so she was like, sure. So they made the switch, and it was great. I mean, but I'm in my 30s, so
yeah. That's right. You still are in your 30s.
Yes, I'm hanging on by a thread.
Yes,
that's all right. I'm claiming it all for the rest of this year.
Yes,
okay?
yes. Hey, listen, it only gets better.
Yes,
I think.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I'm a December baby, so
yeah.
I'm planning to turn up for the 40.
I know that's right.
Yeah.
And so I know we kind of talked about what you were specifically looking for. So what would you recommend that people in general look for if diversity, inclusion, equity is something that is important to them? Because I think we also have to remember, but people have to remember that, even if you are not Black or brown, it would benefit you to
absolutely
be around a diverse environment and diverse students. I remember, so I went to Joliet Central, which was ridiculously diverse. It was one of the things that I realized, one of the benefits I realized I took for granted because I went to UIC. And I was like, oh, so you've never been around other Black people, or even with some of my Black friends, like you've never been around white people. Like I took for granted that going to Joliet Central that I figured out how to get along with everyone, right? And so I forgot where I was going with that.
No, I mean, but ultimately the diversity is an important piece,
right?
And it, you know, Joliet, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
As far as diversity and how some of those things look, but I you know, 100% understand what you're saying. Like, it's important for all students. Like when we talk about culturally responsive teaching, you know, or you know, pedagogy or education, people assume that it's for the Black and brown kid, but it's not just for them. It's for everyone. It's to arm students who identify as white to be allies, to be co-conspirators, to have an awareness. Because if they're not being educated, then it's going to be the most difficult to dismantle those racist systems that we know are in place. And so I would agree. It's diversity is for and equity and inclusion is for every single person. And it's not on the students of color to be the ones that are responsible to educate. And that's not only like culturally wise, but you know, I have a lot of amazing Muslim students who are like, I will not be teaching you about Ramadan every year. You know, like it's every year. Why am I still teaching? You know, so it's important for them as well.
Okay. So I had a different experience in high school. I went to Providence. And so it was also not diverse. You know, there were, I would say maybe, and I could be exaggerating, but I think there were maybe 10, 12 Black people in my graduating class. Like it was not diverse at all. And I can remember being in gym class when you were talking about something you said just a second ago. It brought it to my thoughts. Some of the girls that were my friends, they were asking, well, what do you guys eat for like Thanksgiving? And I remember being like, what do you mean food? Like, what do you mean? And it wasn't, you know,
malicious.
It wasn't malicious, but it was ignorant nonetheless. And like I said, I didn't feel like it was my job to educate you, but at the same time, it became my job because I don't want someone else to feel like it was just kind of off-putting. It wasn't like, but it didn't rub me the right way. And I remember distinctly that feeling like, wow, you know, my experience at Laraway
totally different.
It was totally different.
Yeah.
Like I would have never imagined anyone at our school asking anything like that because we were small, but it was like a family.
It was.
And also just, you know, keep in mind, I mean, white folks or people who identify as white just discovered their whiteness, you know, a couple years ago, right? So y'all not gonna cut that part. But they just discovered. I mean, I have a lot of here's the thing. You know, people obviously in this space wouldn't know me, but I have friends from all backgrounds, and so I intentionally do that so that I can, you know, learn more about myself, learn more about other folks, and you know, it was an awakening after George Floyd, where they're like, you know, I've had friends that be like, you know, I never even really had to think about being white, but you know, I know you talk about being Black all the time, you know, and that's just not a space that they've had to even function in. So they're just, you know, delayed in really approaching that conversation. So I guess, you know, with my position, I do try to, you know, provide a lot of grace in those spaces.
That's a great word.
That is.
Because, you know, there's the other side of, you know, what I try to like, to try to like help them to make connections is, you know, having conversations about colorism and, you know, and what that looks like within our own community. And just understanding that, like, there are things that I also don't know. But I also, you know, but I understand that racism is we got to start there first. You know what I mean? And, but we do have to get to those other spaces. Like, I have a couple of Palestinian friends, and you know, they were saying to me, like, you know, my taxes go to support Israel and to go against my own people. And, you know, what does that feel like? Right. And so I'm like, there's so much to consider and think about. And that's why it's important for us to really, you know, we got to move past the basic piece so we can actually get this grander understanding of, you know, different walks of life.
Wow. That's so interesting, like that they would be forced, so to speak, to support something that directly goes against who they are. You know, that's really something.
But don't we sometimes?
Oh,
we all. I mean, not but
Yeah,
and wait, when you say
100%.
that,
Mhm.
when you say about how, because we have, other than vote people, you know,
They trying to steal that too.
yes, but when we pay our taxes, our property taxes, you know, sometimes there's little control over where they go to.
Absolutely.
I remember selling a house in Bolingbrook School District. And when we got the appraisal back, it came lower than my clients expected it to. Mind you, it did come at what I told them it would sell for, but lower than they expected it to. And when we pulled up comps in Naperville School District. And
very diverse.
Very in Naperville, specifically Nequa Valley, or Nequa Valley. Sorry,
anti-Nequa. I'm warrior for life.
Right.
Sorry, don't Bonzi.
But he literally said, "I don't understand," and I get it. He said, "I don't understand why their house is appraising for more than mine, because my taxes go to this school too. I pay my taxes there." But
so his taxes were in 203 or 204?
Both. So he, you know, I guess because
address.
With the Bolingbrook address.
Well, I was in that same predicament with when Carmen was having us move into. Well, we ended up not going there, but it was a Joliet address, Springfield School, and you know, even thinking about the max of what I could even get, or you know, it's like. Most people when they're thinking about getting a house, they're like, "Ooh, okay, it's only $389."
Yeah.
Ooh, and I was like, "It's only $389." I don't want that. Like that's as far as I can go, because when it comes down to then me thinking about the equity and all those pieces when it's time for me to move, I'm like, "Nah, I need to." So I ended up moving to Plainfield address, and to be honest, and this might take us somewhere else, but I also struggle with the idea of a Joliet address because of police and them stopping me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It's a lot to that.
Well, we cannot have a conversation about taxes without talking about the South suburbs.
Hello.
And their taxes.
Oh, Jesus.
Listen, teach me some.
That is a conversation that is outrageous. Like,
so what's going on?
So many times I have a lot of clients that are looking out in that area, and the property may be listed at, I don't know, $250,000, right? The taxes are $10,000.
Yes.
And so they have no opportunity to ever get the equity out of their properties because you can't sell a house and command the appropriate value. You cannot. It's impossible.
Now, is this Orland, Tinley, or are we thinking
we're
like
talking more like
Flossmoor, Country Club Hills?
Yes.
So the black suburbs.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Because you know that once you get more than 20% of people of color in the area, then the property value goes down. So.
Well, honey, listen. Over there, it's tanking because you have some, beautiful big homes that would be able to sell for a lot more. But when you have taxes, because of course, well, I won't say of course, but just a real estate lesson, taxes are what really drives the
price of your mortgage.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Because you may have a house over here in Joliet that's $250,000 and the taxes are $5,000. And then you have a house in the south suburbs at $250,000 and the taxes are $10,000.
Wow.
You've got a huge disparity in
your mortgage.
Why are the taxes so high?
That's a good question.
That's a good question.
Because because I think about, my parents, they're in Aurora, District 204, area, and their taxes are ridiculous. But like, there's an understanding of the area in which they're, paying into, so not to no slight to the south suburbs, but like 10,000 is
and sometimes it's houses that are way less than 200,000.
Well, that's that right. My taxes are not more than 10,000.
Listen, you may have a house that's 110,000 with like 8, 9, 10. Like,
that's crazy.
People cannot afford that. Some of the people that want to live in those areas because they have family there, they've grown up there, now they want to make a move to do something better for their families. They don't have the opportunity because they are pre-approved for not necessarily the purchase price is what counts, but it's the actual
The
monthly
taxes.
mortgage payment.
Right.
And so you are qualified for a $1,200 payment. However, once you have a $110,000 property
Right.
and $10,000 taxes, you're well beyond.
Yep.
So they may be paying more in a monthly mortgage than someone has a $250,000 house and $110,000.
That's crazy. Well, and you know, when I think about taxes, because I really be on these local elections. Like, you know, so I know 65% of my taxes goes to the school district. So my question then, we need to go break this down.
Yes.
Because I want to know where this is coming from, where is it going, and you know, because you can levy, you know, for certain things within the schools, but I mean, I'm pretty familiar with schools in the South Suburb. Again, no shade. There's a lot of brilliant people in those spaces, but what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing with this money?
Yeah.
So I don't like it.
No,
But
I don't like
Illinois
it
is
either.
a tough state for taxes in general.
It is.
So.
And when you think about it, when people talk about how much less expensive it is to live in other states, it's not necessarily because of the price of the houses.
Yeah.
It's because of taxes. Because when you look at taxes and the impact that they have on your monthly mortgage, almost literally, you look at the yearly taxes and you divide it by 12.
Yeah, it's real simple.
Right? Yeah. So if you have $12,000 in taxes, that's $1,000 every month.
In addition to
your principal. And your interest.
It's not gonna work for me.
Right. And so, you know,
it's already hard enough for us to get. If we're going. I mean, it's already hard enough for us to be able to get those things, to get the type of homes that we desire. And I remember getting into the house that I'm in now, and to be honest, what is it? Is it your lender? Yes. Like that was the first time that I started to understand what was going on and he had to like shift it to like an equity frame so I could be like, what? And I was upset because initially I could only get an FHA. And I was like, and the max is $380? Why would I do with that? Like, I mean, I don't mean to sound that way, but you know what I mean?
It is what it is. Yeah.
Right. The house I wanted was $429. So, you know, and it wasn't, and so, you know, and having that conversation and understanding like, you know, people of color, we're not all coming from this nest egg. We're not all coming from college already paid off. Or, you know, and a lot of people that I'm sure that you work with that are people of color, like when we look at that debt to income ratio, it's college loans and, you know, credit card debt. And so if it wasn't for the equity that I had been able to create from my first home, I wouldn't have made it into the conventional 10%
And then
loan.
that's the problem because the people that are buying these properties with the outrageous taxes, they will never be able to get the equity that is going to elevate their families and take them to the next level.
To even be able to establish and have. And I mean, you know, but we can get into redlining and all that and all that. It's still residuals of that, and people really need to understand that it's a real thing. So when I go and teach at the high schools, I talk about all of these things.
Yes.
Like, and you need to know.
Well, and I'm convinced that part of the modern day redlining is taxes.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. Well, he said it. There's a recording. I think it may have been with Reagan, one of them. But I mean, ultimately, that's what he's talking about. He's like, you can't say the N-word anymore. So you say things like, you know, taxes and et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, they don't know that they're getting screwed around. But at the end of the day, it's going to impact people of color more than anyone else. It's the same thing with, you know, Roe versus Wade and that whole overturn. Like, again, that is something that is intentionally designed to impact people of color.
Yes, because like when you think about it, we talk about, I think it's interesting that the south suburbs of Cook County have higher taxes than Chicago.
Hello?
For sure.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And just understanding, I have that conversation often with clients about how, okay, so this house is this much with $3,000 in taxes. This house is $10,000 more with $4,000 in tax. Well, with $2,000 in taxes. This house with $3,000 in taxes is actually going to cost you more per month than the house that's lower price with more expensive taxes. Due to amortization.
And we're not even teaching people about it. You know what I'm saying? Like I spent some time in Bellwood. Shout out to Bellwood 88 last week. And the kids are amazing. They're like, we want to know how to make money. Like that's their whole thing. And so having conversations with them about understanding taxes and numbers and those pieces like that is what they want to learn about. So, circling back to your original question as far as representation and, students being able to have people to look like them, like these are things that they would be able to learn to equip them.
Yeah.
Because I'm still figuring things out. All I know is that I was trying to do the stock market. Okay. And I got my little Robinhood app and they were like Airbnb and DoorDash is for the public. And I was like, oh snap. And I go into my little app. It's not there yet. So I figured out it's on E-Trade. The rich get richer. And that's that. But if you don't know that,
you don't know that.
And they don't want us to know.
And how much more likely are our students to learn and know from a teacher, instructor who has their best interests?
Absolutely.
Who
absolutely
looks like them.
Absolutely. And that's, and that's the part that's difficult. In the space that I'm in now, we do have schools in our district that don't have any person of color in the building at all. And, it is, and the part that is frustrating is that, people who identify as white assume that Black and brown folks just know. Like, no, I was raised in the same educational school system as you. And so, like, us getting this knowledge has been on my own accord. And so our students, they assume that our students will be able to have the language and be able to advocate for themselves and know that that's, they're being mistreated. No, that's not how that works, So it's important for us to continue to create these spaces and get folks in these areas and have podcasts like this where we get people to be in front of them because they tell us what they need.
Yeah. I think about how much my mother is a retired educator. Yeah. And I think about how much, from what I understand, she helped to make sure or to ensure that there were people in place in the system. And as much even now that she will advocate for, friends, family, or really anyone who asks. How important is having an advocate, whether it be someone in the school system or even just a parent who understands what's going on?
I have a long answer for that.
Go for it.
Are we wrapping it up?
We might need a part 2 later.
Right.
I'm like,
seriously.
A lot of parents of color get shut down.
Yeah.
I've been someone who is a parent of color who's gotten shut, or they attempted to shut down. Right. But because I'm an educator, I have that advantage. And so I do think about those who are not, even supporting my bonus daughter with her IEP and supporting, bio parents on like, well, this is what this means, et cetera, because they're not explaining it. And it's not malicious, right? It's just, it's a system. It's a system that's in place. And so I have a lot of different things that parents can do. And areas in which parents can be in these spaces. And I support, a lot of parents in my school district now on, where they can go, who they can talk to, and how we go about making sure that our kids are safe in these spaces. Because schools are looking different these days.
They are. Yeah. One thing I will say, though, as a parent, you have to advocate for your child. I don't care, Black, brown, white, yellow. You have to be a presence in that school. They need to understand from the top all the way to the bottom. I care about my child. And, we don't have to get undone.
Right. Okay.
But we're going to talk about whatever is going on. And I think so many times, just experience with family and friends and whomever, but, a lot of times we will kind of shy away from asking for the things that we need or being open to someone saying or suggesting something that could be beneficial for our children because we don't want them to be labeled. But a label sometimes will be that thing that can get them the assistance and the support that they need.
Yeah.
But if you're unwilling to even allow someone to present that as a possible suggestion, your child is the one that is suffering. The teachers are not going to care, Black, brown, or whatever. They're not going to care more than you care.